Number 10, A Date with the Devil. In New Mutants Volume 3, Issue 30, we find Mephisto taking a pretty strange deal. I mean, compared to his normal read the fine print soul collecting type of deal, that is. This time around, a team of X-Men accidentally enter the home of Mephisto, the underworld, literally hell. So he offered to let them go about their super business and leave hell on one condition. That condition being that he gets a date night with Amara Aquila. So the team encourages her to say no, but she seals the deal. Mephisto says, "Hey, I'll call you," and then whoosh, they're all gone. Just like that, the team is free. So the team rescued Blink, and then Amara prepared for her date. Issue 37, titled A Date with the Devil, we see Magma double checking that she looks good for her date night coming up. Making sure the curls look good, eyeliner's great, we're looking good, let's do it. And just like prom night, her man arrives at the door with flowers. What a gentleman. So they dine, of course, in the third circle of hell, overlooking a lake of lava with volcanoes going off. It's quite the spectacle. I mean, Niagara Falls, hell, you know, both are pretty romantic. And of course, they had an amazing pit band to set the mood. She returns back to normal life and admits that she had a pretty decent time once he stopped trying so hard. See, usually when a friend goes on a date, you know, it's exciting to see how it went. Now, imagine if your roommate went on a date with the devil. Oh my God. The amount of tea I would make them spill, we'd never sleep. We'd talk all night. I'd also be worried sick. I'd be like, "Hey, how was your night?" He was the devil. So are you good? Is your soul good? Awesome. As far as force deals go, this one wasn't too bad. But there's plenty more on this list. And before we get to number 9, guys, if you could go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, because it really helps out our studio quite a bit. Thank you so much for watching. Now back to this crazy list. Number 9, closing time. If you've worked at a bar, you know it's the worst when people stay right until the very end, right until closing time. Or even worse, they'll show up minutes before you're about to get out of there. Like 3 minutes before last call, someone will walk in, grab a drink, and then they'll just chill and unwind the entire night, which is fine, but sometimes you're like, "Hey man, I've been here for 10 hours, I gotta go home." Now imagine if one of those late night visits was from Mephisto. See, in Journey into Mystery issue 627, we see another hobby of the devil's besides taking souls that bartenders will tell stories of. What he would do is show up every night to a random bar or a pub, and then he tells a story. He vents, he lets things off his chest. And if you listen and survive, he'll give you a really nice tip. And I'm talking like a really nice tip. You don't have to work anymore at a bar after that point. But if you slip up, things can go pretty south pretty fast. Now this amuses Mephisto. He enjoys playing along and chatting it up with the poor soul who offered to pick up that shift that night. I wonder if I'm going to see him one night, hopefully. Fingers crossed. Actually, no, let's not see him. Let's not do that. Number 8. What happens in Vegas? Doctor Strange Damnation is a 4-parter that puts Mephisto and Doctor Strange in the most epic game of blackjack. Yeah, you thought Casino Royale had like the high stakes? No devil involved. No way. Just Daniel Craig. So following the destruction of Las Vegas after Hydra's short-lived empire, Doctor Strange tried putting the city back to normal using his magic. But in doing so, it resulted in this hotel emerging from the ground, and that hotel just happened to be Hotel Inferno. And of course, inside that hotel is Mephisto. Yeah, it turns out when the city went down, Mephisto claimed all of their souls in hell. So in order to come to an agreement to save the city and the people inhabiting it, a game of brimstone blackjack was in order. I mean, being forced on a date is one thing, but a game of blackjack with the devil? I mean, what a better way to start an adventure.
Number 7, transformed Carly Cooper. And not in a good way. While under the mantle of Goblin King, Norman sought information from Carly on the true identity of Superior Spider-Man. He had her kidnapped, and when she refused to give up the information, she refused. He decided to recruit her into his Goblin army. Exposing her to the Goblin formula, he turned Carly into one of his own deranged minions, and for a time she served him under the mantle of Monster. She would eventually be returned to her former self, but this experience would leave its mark, changing Carly forever. Immediately after her recovery, she also cut Peter Parker and Spider-Man out of her life and moved from New York to New Orleans. Though she would come back. She would get over it, but it was still pretty terrible.
Number 6, Johnny Blaze. Marvel Spotlight issue 5, we see a legend being born. The Ghost Rider. See, Johnny Blaze was a stunt performer, and when his stepfather, Crash Simpson, got cancer, Johnny opted to make a deal with Mephisto to save him. And then when Crash tried to return to the stunt life, he crashed. So now Johnny's upset and he has a few choice words for the devil. So Crash still ended up passing away after all, just not from cancer. Kind of not a great deal. So when Mephisto returned to collect his soul, because he thinks that's a fair deal, Roxanne intervened and used the spell of banishment from one of Johnny's books. Before Mephisto got cast away, he grafted the essence of the demon Zarathos to Johnny's body, thus creating the Ghost Rider. Imagine if Roxanne hadn't showed up, he would have just tricked another poor person into trading souls for some lousy deal. Careful what you wish for, folks.
Halfway through, and at number 5, framed Barry's father. In the process of killing Barry's mother out of anger since he couldn't manage to kill Barry, Thawne ended up framing his father for the murder and gets him sent to prison. Obviously, this wasn't really avoidable because of how time works or whatever, but this still causes Barry a great deal of pain. I mean, that was the ultimate intent, but it's still pretty messed up. And in The Flash Season 2, Thawne confesses to the murder of Nora Allen in an effort to show Barry that even with his dad out of prison, he still won't be happy, which is even more messed up. Especially given that him getting his father out of prison directly results in his death at the hands of Zoom. And then Barry meets his father's doppelganger from Earth 3 known as Jay Garrick. And then another version of his father named Barry Allen from Earth 90 in the Elseworlds crossover. Meeting Jay also sends Barry spiraling into a depression that causes him to create the Flashpoint timeline in the Arrowverse as well, which was already an earlier point. So I think that this definitely earns a spot on the list.
Number 4. Cynthia Von Doom. The mother of Victor Von Doom. She was known, of course, to dabble in the dark arts. She often communicated with demons and used spells. She was born in Latveria into a Romani clan, and her people were constantly facing persecution at the hands of the Baron and his men. So she turned to Mephisto to make a deal, promising her soul in exchange to punish them. So he gave her powers to take care of them, but the only thing was, that same power would also take care of the children that were there as well. So he gave her the power, but just not the control. So she couldn't live with herself after what she had done to the children, so she made her husband promise that her son would never follow her footsteps. And then after that, her soul moved to her forever home, which was hell.
Number 3, director of H.A.M.M.E.R. During Dark Reign, we see Norman Osborn basically become the head of what ends up being the S.H.I.E.L.D. replacement. Due to the fact that he eliminated the Skrull Queen, he gets to take over and creates his own agency called H.A.M.M.E.R, an acronym that doesn't initially stand for, well, anything actually. It was just picked because Osborn thought it was cool. As the director of H.A.M.M.E.R, Osborn also took it upon himself to put together his own Avenger team, with him as the leader, Iron Patriot. Being a villain himself, you can guess what kind of people he called on to assemble his Avengers team. More villains, and some really confused and tormented heroes like Sentry. This was a really dark time in Marvel's history, as Norman Osborn used all this power to do all sorts of awful stuff, all under the guise or in the often false name of heroic reasoning.
Number 2. Fragments of Greater Darkness. So Avengers West Coast Volume 2, Issue 52, we find out the truth behind Scarlet Witch's children, Billy and Tommy. Again, this is another WandaVision theory that I think is happening. Listen up, here we go. So like I said earlier, these 5 pieces of Pandemonium's soul were actually Mephisto's. So Mephisto tricked Pandemonium and then gathered beings possessing the appropriate fragments. 2 of those 5 fragments just happened to be children of Scarlet Witch and Vision. So when Pandemonium arrived, he took the kids, which in turn gave Mephisto full strength, and then this of course left Scarlet Witch having a breakdown. Again, it's been hinted at that Agnes in WandaVision is actually Agatha Harkness, which would make sense. She's a witch, and then in episode 6, we saw everybody in their comic accurate look, and she was of course rocking the witch outfit. Coincidence? I think not. And finally, number 1. One More Day. We finish off with this 4-parter, the One More Day Spider-Man storyline. It began in 2007 in Amazing Spider-Man issue 544, and instead of Pete dealing with the usual thugs or some enhanced science villain with a tail, we see Spider-Man make a deal with the devil. So after Spider-Man revealed his identity in the Civil War storyline, people of course were after him now. So when a bullet strikes Aunt May instead of Peter, he of course feels like he's the one to blame. Absolutely, you took your mask off, that's what happens. Even the opening of the story, it shows Aunt May in a hospital bed with Peter at her side, talking about how she was perfectly fine just a mere days ago. It's very sad. And Mephisto has entered the chat once again. He offers Peter a deal while Aunt May is dying. So basically what happens is that the world will forget about Peter's identity and Aunt May will live. But the whole Mephisto magic is that MJ and Peter never got married. That's just gonna go away. So it's a lose-lose, and you're just trying to be a superhero. So they hug one final time, and MJ explains that their love was always meant to be, and that whatever Mephisto does is unstoppable. And then poof, the deal is sealed. The next day, Peter wakes up, all is fine and normal in his casual life. All that backstory was just wiped out in the turn of a page. Thanks to Mephisto, because your deals are just great.
And a 10 boyfriend killer. After his research on the Speed Force while at residency in the Flash Museum had gained some traction, Eobard fell in love with a reporter named Rose who had been hired by Central City Science Today to interview him. However, he learned that she was engaged. So his future self interfered with the timeline, killing Rose's fiance in an attempt to get her to love him, but it didn't work. So he proceeded to kill every man she had started seeing after her fiance, and eventually every man who she had ever dated at all. So when she steadfastly refused to believe that her fiance was gone for good, they became platonic friends. However, she continued to just brush off Thawne's romantic advances, eventually retaliating physically when he attempted to kiss her. In anger, his future self traumatized the reporter as a child, rendering her mute and causing her to be institutionalized for the rest of her life. Although, if she was still friends with Eobard while knowing full well that he was just in love with her, she only had him around for attention at that point. Any good person wouldn't be friends with someone who was in love with them if they didn't feel the same. Just saying. I'm causing a few of you to rethink your relationships, huh? In at 9, ripped a letter. This doesn't sound like a lot, but trust me. Not even Batman was safe from this devil. During the events of the Flashpoint comic arc, Barry brought back to Batman a letter from his father, who is alive in the Flashpoint timeline as Batman. It's the only contact that Batman has had with his parents ever since they died, so it would be a shame if something were to happen to it. Oh wait, that's right, Thawne decides to rip it to shreds so that it couldn't even be reassembled. It also didn't help that Thomas was the reason that Thawne was killed in that timeline, so yeah, this was certainly a way to get back at Thomas, even though he was dead in this timeline, which was probably the best way to get revenge. But like, this was still super unnecessary, but I guess it was worth it in the end for Eobard, but it would have messed up Batman real bad. And at 8, Flashpoint. Speaking of Flashpoint, let's talk about the fact that Thawne is in essence the reason that Flashpoint is a thing. I mean, if Thawne had never killed Barry's mother, Barry would never have had to go back to save her, resulting in the Flashpoint timeline. Depending on what version of time travel, or I guess what theory of time travel you believe. Either there was an original timeline where Barry's mother didn't die but he still became the Flash, or the killing of Barry's mother always takes place, resulting in a chicken and the egg scenario where Thawne had to create the Flash to then create himself to then go back and create themselves. Either way, without Thawne, there would be no Flashpoint. His mere existence is what causes Flashpoint to be made, even if Barry is the one who ends up changing the past to save his mother. So I'm gonna count this as something that Thawne did.
Number 7. Master Pandemonium. Martin Preston made his comic book appearance in West Coast Avengers Volume 2, Issue 4. He was a student at Juilliard and a big-time Hollywood star. I mean, the guy was killing it. He had money, fame, he was in his 50s, but the guy looked like he was early 40s. Just killing it, just killing the game. Then he thought it would be a cool idea to drink and drive. Not a cool idea, never do that. So of course, after the crash, he was approached by Mephisto, and Mephisto had repaired his arm by calling forward a demon. Imagine if Bucky had his arm replaced by a demon. God, it would be a mess. Leaving a 5-point shaped hole in his chest, Mephisto had lied to Martin and said that it's because he had separated his soul into 5 different places among Earth's dimension. That was in fact a lie. In actuality, Mephisto had replaced his other limbs with demons as well. So now he's a walking, talking Trojan horse for the devil.
And at 6, lead fascists. In the Crisis on Earth X crossover event from the Arrowverse, we get our world and a wedding of Iris West and Barry Allen interrupted by a group of fascist soldiers from an alternate reality known as Earth X. The classic Germany wins World War II scenario. However, these soldiers are accompanied by evil versions of Green Arrow and Supergirl. The evil version of Flash is missing, however he does appear in the Ray animated series, which this crossover also technically has a crossover with, but they're just brought into real life, same kinda like how they did with the Vixen crossover. But the evil version of the Flash in this crossover, oh you bet your ass it's Thawne. Wearing Wells' face no less, presumably having killed the Barry of Earth X, Thawne helps Overgirl and Dark Arrow lead a group of fascist soldiers on the attack, nearly taking control of Earth 1 if not for the Justice League that hadn't officially been formed yet. Even the Joker turned on Red Skull when he learned that he was actually a fascist and not some kook in a costume. Reverse Flash is worse than Joker. Confirmed!
Number 5. Tried to make Spider-Man his heir. If you can't beat him, make them join you. Mwahaha! That was Norman's thinking in the Revenge of the Green Goblin story anyways. Here, Norman attempts to brainwash Peter Parker into giving in to his dark side and joining the Green Goblin legacy. I guess I should say his green side. Of course, Norman didn't succeed in the end, but for a moment there, it almost seemed like he might. He also put Peter through hell during this whole endeavor, so regardless of whether or not his plan was successful, it was still pretty awful for Peter the whole time.
In at 4, killed his family. Eobard Thawne was born in 2451. His parents genetically engineered him to be highly intelligent and to have a particular appearance. However, as he grew up, they became concerned about his lack of social skills and tendency to daydream, which was frowned upon in their very regimented society. Hoping that caring for a sibling would help Eobard adjust, his parents had a second son, Robert. Eobard struggled to manage his little brother and chaffed when reprimanded by their parents for his periodic outbursts that were triggered by his frustration. But later down the line, he applied to the Flash Museum to study the Speed Force, but it was rejected. So he started researching it illegally. But then he was caught by Robert, who was an officer in the Science Police. This caused Eobard a great deal of pain, which is understandable given that your brother sent you to prison, so much in fact that a future version of Eobard traveled into the past and prevented Robert from ever being born, which caused him to get the job at the Flash Museum. His knowledge of the Speed Force also caused his peers to nickname him Professor Zoom, but eventually his parents grew concerned and instigated the closure of the Flash Museum. So again, his future self interfered with the timeline and caused the deaths of his parents, allowing him to continue his research. Yeah, that's right. In post-Infinite Crisis, Eobard Thawne killed his family.
Number 3. Using James Mandarin. Doctor Strange Volume 2 Issue 15 titled Where There's Smoke. We see Mephisto use James Mandarin as a pawn against Doctor Strange. It's brutal. So the issue kicks off with Doctor Strange saving a woman from a fire, and when he returns home he meets up with Clea. But before they can even catch up, a man named James Mandarin comes to the door. But he has a knife in his hand and he claims to know who and what Doctor Strange truly is. But Doctor Strange plays it cool, of course. James does not play it cool. See, he wants to be Strange's disciple. So he slashes at his own throat to make Doctor Strange use his powers and save him. What a power play. Also, you're so insane, but power play indeed. So Strange heals him up, of course, and he proudly puts it together that no normal doctor could have patched him up that fast. And then out pops the devil to make things just that much more exciting. So now the next issue is Strange saving his love from the afterlife. So while Strange waits for the help of Wong to get him out of there, he has to then face off against all sorts of illusions and deceptions unleashed by the devil. They're trying to change him into one of the Hell Lord's minions. So Wanda Maximoff is playing a role in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. So I feel like WandaVision will introduce Mephisto, and then in his movie he'll have to go in and finish off the Unholy Terrors with Wanda's help.
Penultimately, in at number 2, the Dark Multiverse. The original Flashpoint story sees Barry save his mother and create a whole new world where he isn't the Flash, like I explained in number 8. However, in the Dark Multiverse version of this story, Barry doesn't get his speed back, instead dying when he and Thomas attempt to restore his power. So the vacuum left by the Flash is filled by none other than, you guessed it, Eobard Thawne, who claims to be the Flash and proceeds to try and end the war between the Amazons and Atlanteans by threatening and killing, which obviously just works out in his favor and he becomes a hero. Just kidding. Instead, this causes the Atlanteans and the Amazons to team up and try to destroy America. So as a way to stop this, Thawne runs back in time and creates his own version of this new timeline, crafting it perfectly to his whims, something that the Flash show would later adapt briefly. In the comics though, he prevented the Flash from ever being created, he saved Bruce Wayne as well as Martha and Thomas Wayne, resulting in there being no Batman, and ends up converting every superhero to his purpose, resulting in Thawne having a whole Justice League at his disposal. They even have reverse Flash symbols on their outfits. Plus, preventing Batman from ever being made, and I say this every time, is the best decision that anyone has ever made as a villain in this universe. If there's no Batman, there's no one that's going to resist you, because Batman is going to resist every single time. And finally, in at number 1, reverse Flashpoint. The Flash Armageddon is currently an ongoing 5-part crossover taking place in the first 5 episodes of Flash Season 8. However, in episode 4, spoiler alert, 3, 2, 1, it's revealed that Eobard Thawne, who looks like Wells again, but is using his real name, creates his own version of Flashpoint, where thanks to the new negative still force, instead of saving Barry's mother, he manages to kill Barry as a child, as he set out to do so many years ago. Or I guess Will set out to do. I don't know, time travel is weird, man. Anyway, he kills Barry as a child and then takes his place at CCPD the night the accelerator exploded, resulting in him becoming the Flash. And as this episode takes place, one night away from marrying Iris West. Yeah, so basically, Thawne changed the timeline so that he was actually the Flash. No imitation, no fake outs, he was truly the Flash. Like in this scenario, Speed Force chose him. And Barry was the Reverse Flash, even connected to the negative Speed Force, and having the classic red lightning and yellow suit. And as Damien Dark said, that is a work of evil art.
Number 10, Reshaped the Universe. This one only gets ranked lower because it comes to us from the alternate reality of a What If comic. In this What If story, Norman Osborn gets his hands on the Infinity Gauntlet and uses it to reshape reality, all to impress his daddy. What's even more awful is when his father confesses that he actually loves him. Norman then can't even bring himself to believe his father's acceptance, and in the end destroys his father, thereby destroying himself in the process. So this was in a weird way not just a bad thing he did to reality, but also did to his own self. Which I guess would be a good thing for reality. Definitely be a good thing for Spider-Man. Number 9, Cheated. We find out about this one in Red Goblin, Red Death, and what's worse, it's a story that in the present day of that comic has a pretty gruesome ending. Here Norman runs into an old Empire University pal, if you could call him that. Ned Tobolowsky was someone Norman knew in school, and it's implied that at least they were friends, or at least acquaintances, before Ned spilled the beans about a cheating apparatus that Norman was using and had built. Ned's big mouth almost cost Norman his schooling. He lost his scholarship and was almost expelled, like these close. Honestly, if he created a cheating machine though, he probably should have been expelled in my opinion. Like, I don't know how they let him continue going to school after that. Norman gets Ned back though when Ned stops him on the street years later while he is Red Goblin. Not a good time. So true, what happens to Ned at least wasn't necessarily Green Goblin's doing, but I'm gonna count this anyways because 1, this thing happened way in his past, and 2, this list is more centered around Osborn as Goblin as opposed to like any specific Goblin identity. It's called Green Goblin, but I'm approaching it as like a Norman Osborn list. I know we've seen others wear that mantle as well, but I think Norman by far is one of the most dastardly Goblins out there, red, green, or otherwise. Number 8, Framed Spider-Man. If you think J. Jonah Jameson is bad, wait till you see what happens when Osborn takes over control of the Daily Bugle. At one point, Norman Osborn tries to use the paper himself to drag Spider-Man's name through the mud after buying it and then blackmailing Jameson into giving him full control over the paper and what gets published there. He then frames Spider-Man for murder, making it look like his webbing basically caused someone to die by asphyxiation, and puts a bounty on Spider-Man's head, starting off the Spider Hunt story arc. Of course, Peter finds a way out of all of this trouble and makes sure that Norman gets his in the end, but he still has to suffer through everyone hunting him down and believing that he was a killer, so still, it's pretty terrible. And before we move on to this next spot, just a quick reminder to give this video a thumbs up if you love Norman as much as we do. Love hate.
And at 7 creates the Flash. Aside from the whole killing Barry's mom thing, turning Barry into the Flash, Thawne in season 1 of the Flash TV show did a whole other thing. After being stranded in our present after killing Barry's mother due to a lack of speed, Thawne decides that the only way to get back to his time was to get the Flash's help. So he kills Harrison Wells, takes over his identity, wears his face, and creates the particle accelerator early. 6 years early to be exact, since originally the accelerator explodes in 2020, thus creating a whole new timeline of events, similar to what Nora does when she helps Barry destroy the Thinker satellite in the season 4 finale, advancing time by 5 years. This time Thawne advanced it by 6 years. Using the face of another man to train Barry, gain his trust, and then ultimately use him to get back to his own time, that's pretty messed up if you ask me.
Number 6, drove Harry insane. I mean, I don't think we can blame Norman for all of Harry's villainous actions, but we can definitely blame him, I think, for most of them. As of late, Harry has resurfaced as the villain known as Kindred, twisted into some combination of Harry's soul combined with that of a demon. This even darker version of Harry blames both Peter and his father for everything that went wrong in his life, and comes back to hold them both accountable and make them pay. I guess you could also look at it in the way that Norman and Peter share the blame here for Harry's psyche cracking. As in loving both of them and then discovering their true identities, it created great conflict in him, causing him to turn on Spider-Man and later also to resent his father and his role as Green Goblin. And kind of his legacy, really, because he also, you know, kind of gets that crazy from his dad, just saying.
Number 5. Silver Surfer. When Mephisto first came into Marvel Comics, many thought it was during the events of Ghost Rider, like I just mentioned. He actually tried taking Norrin Radd's soul before in Silver Surfer issue 3. The Power and the Prize. The story begins with the Silver Surfer being tracked down by Mephisto because he's drawn to his power and nobility. What a perfect soul to take. The guy's great. He sees him as an obstacle, of course, because he's the Silver Surfer and he's amazing. So Mephisto captures Norrin Radd's love to use as bait, but the Silver Surfer beat him down. He's one of the few Marvel heroes that actually had defeated Mephisto. So honestly, if the devil ends up showing up in WandaVision at some point, I wouldn't be surprised if the Silver Surfer is next up shortly after. I think we're gonna go more cosmic, especially with Thor 4. Definitely with Thor 4.
Number 4, killed JJ. That's right. While in main continuity, JJ would end up being blackmailed by Norman Osborn, in the Ultimate Universe, he would end up being murdered by him. I know, so crazy, especially considering that Jameson thought he had actually shot Norman dead and was in the middle of panicking over the fact. Norman, however, surprised him by getting up and transforming into his goblin self, revealing that in this universe, he was Immortal Green Goblin. Yep, before we had the Immortal Hulk series, we had this.
Getting close to the end, and at number 3, the Spear of Destiny. The Spear of Destiny, or Holy Lance, was an immensely powerful biblical artifact capable of altering reality. It is mentioned in Judeo-Christian religions, and it was an ordinary spear before Roman soldier Longinus used it to pierce the side of Jesus Christ after he died on the cross, resulting in its immense supernatural powers. The second season of the Arrowverse show, Legends of Tomorrow, revolves around the Legion of Doom, composed of Damien Darhk from a time before he was killed by the Green Arrow, Malcolm Merlin after just watching Damien die on TV, and Thawne. Captain Cold, Heatwave, and Rip Hunter were also among the members, but the main unholy trinity were these 3. They did end up managing to rewrite reality, and in this reality, Eobard Thawne made himself mayor of Central City and the owner of Star Labs. Also in the present time, not 2040 or 2140 or whenever he was born, which is weird. But still wanting status and fame, he would use his genius and company to solve various problems around the world, to which he gained various awards and influence over the world. He also had the demonic speedster that was chasing him, Black Flash, as his personal pet prisoner who constantly struggled to get free of his cell. He also made it so that Ray Palmer, Martin Stein, and Jefferson Jackson worked for him and had miserable lives. He also had Rip Hunter trapped inside the Wave Rider when it was shrunk, and he kept it as like a little statue in his lab, which is that's a whole other can of worms.
Number 2, killed Gwen Stacy. We all know this one to be one of the worst things that Norman as the Green Goblin has done, so I don't think it's a surprise that this one is high up on our list. One of the worst, not just from Peter's perspective, by the way, but also from fans' perspectives. Many still believe that Gwen was actually the one destined to be with Peter, and in fact, that she would be a better match for him than Mary Jane herself. I personally love MJ and Peter together, and I like to think of Gwen's death as a what if that can only really ever theoretically be answered if she lived. Still, even just from Spider-Man's perspective, this has to be one of the most dastardly deeds his foe has ever committed, as Peter Parker for years has also still blamed himself for Gwen's demise, making this wound just that much more tender and that much more deep. This Green Goblin did it, but then Peter still blamed himself. Rough. Number 1, had children with Gwen Stacy. It was really hard for me to try and reason which of these last few points was really the worst, because they're all really bad, especially these last 2. Killing Gwen or having children with her. Which one is worse? In the end, however, considering that he later kills her, I figured this one took the cake. Yep, as if Norman Osborn wasn't diabolical and creepy enough in the comics, we had to retcon in something even more nauseating for him. Enter Sin's past. Here it's retconned in that Norman and Gwen slept slept together, and as if that wasn't bad enough, he got her pregnant. She gave birth to twins in secrecy in Europe who would be raised by Norman to think that Spider-Man was their father, and that it was he who had killed their mother. I'm not sure if it gets any worse than that, but if it does, I don't think I want to find out how it gets worse.